Module 8. Where were you yesterday? Our world. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to talk about life in the past. Vocabulary. Listen and read. Noisy. Carriages. Activity 1. Look at the picture. What differences you notice between these pictures and a picture of a modern city? Yes. In these pictures, there are horses and carriages instead of cars. There aren't any shopping centers. Instead, there are small shops. There aren't any cinemas, only theaters. Listen.
A city from the past. This is a picture of New York City in the year 1900. It was very different then. There weren't any shopping centres or cinemas, but there were shops and theatres. There weren't many cars back then, but there were lots of horses and carriages. The streets of New York City weren't quiet. They were noisy and full of people, just like today.
Listen and read along.
A city from the past. This is a picture of New York City in the year 1900. It was very different then. There weren't any shopping centres or cinemas, but there were shops and theatres. There weren't many cars back then, but there were lots of horses and carriages. The streets of New York City weren't quiet. They were noisy and full of people, just like today.
Answer the questions. What city are these pictures of?
They're pictures of New York City.
What year is it in these pictures?
It's the year 1900.
Were there any shopping centers and cinemas then?
No, there weren't.
Were there any theaters?
Yes, there were.
Were there many cars back then?
No, there weren't. There were horses and carriages.
Were the streets quiet back then?
No, they weren't. They were noisy and full of people back then too.
Grammar. Listen and repeat.
There was a theatre. There wasn't a bus. There were carriages. There weren't many cars.
There was. There wasn't. And there were. There weren't. There was, or there wasn't. is for singular. There were or there weren't is for plural. Let's take a look at some examples. There was a theatre. There wasn't a theatre. There were theatres. There weren't any theatres. There was a bus. There wasn't a bus. There were carriages. There weren't many cars. Activity 2. What was there in New York City in the year 1900? Read Activity 1 and tick. Picture A. Picture B. Picture C. Picture D. Picture E. Picture F. Picture G. Look at Activity 2 and write about New York City in the year 1900. One. There weren't any shopping centers. There weren't any shopping centers. 2. There were shops. There were shops. 3. There weren't any cinemas. There weren't any cinemas. 4. There weren't any buses. There weren't any buses. 5. There were many carriages. There were many carriages. 6. There were theatres. There were theatres. Activity 4. Look at the picture. What do you think Lucy is doing? Yes. Lucy is talking about what life was like in her town in the year 1900. Listen.
There were cars, but there weren't any shopping centers.
Listen and repeat.
There were cars, but there weren't any shopping centres.
Now, in this activity, you will have to do it at home. And you will have to ask your parents or grandparents about what their town was like in the year 1900. Then, complete the table by writing tick or cross, according to what they say. Look at the example. This is my town in the year 1900. There weren't any shopping centres, but there were few shops. There weren't any cinemas or theatres. There were cars. There weren't any buses or horse carriages. The streets are noisy. Choose the correct picture.
"70 years ago, there weren't any shopping centre in my town. There were only small shop including a cafe. There were cars and buses. The streets were quiet. There was a theatre but there weren't any cinemas."
Which one was Mrs. Sarah Town 70 years ago?